In a neighborhood where dreams are as worn as the cracked sidewalks, 13-year-old Malik Johnson finds solace in acts of kindness. Raised by a single mother who works tirelessly to make ends meet, Malik spends his weekends mowing lawns for elderly neighbors who can't afford the service. But one sweltering summer day, when Malik decides to mow the overgrown lawn of a reclusive new neighbor, Mr. Harrison, he unknowingly sets off a chain of events that will change his life forever. The next morning, Malik wakes to an astonishing sight: a brand new, top-of-the-line lawnmower sitting in his yard, a gift from the mysterious Mr. Harrison. As Malik and his mother are drawn into the old man's world, they discover that he is not just a neighbor but a reclusive millionaire with a troubled past. Grateful for Malik's selflessness, Mr. Harrison offers them a chance to escape their struggles, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But with this offer comes a heavy burden. Malik must help Mr. Harrison confront the dark secrets he's been hiding for decades. Caught between the promise of a better life and the weight of Mr. Harrison's demands, Malik faces a moral dilemma that tests everything he believes about kindness, redemption, and what it truly means to do the right thing. As buried truths come to light, Malik must decide whether to help a man seeking redemption, or walk away from the man who could change his life forever. The Grass is Greener is a poignant tale of generosity, the cost of forgiveness, and the unexpected consequences of a simple good deed. Malik's journey will leave you questioning the true power of kindness in a world where the lines between right and wrong are not always clear. Chapter 1: The Kindness That Started It All. Scene 1: Malik's Routine. Malik Johnson woke up to the soft light filtering through the worn curtains of his small bedroom. He could hear the faint sounds of the city coming to life outside, but inside, everything was still and quiet. He carefully slid out of bed, not wanting to disturb his mother, who was still asleep in the next room. Angela Johnson had worked another late shift the night before, and Malik knew she needed every minute of rest she could get. Malik quickly dressed in a pair of faded jeans and an old t-shirt that had once belonged to his older cousin. The clothes were a little too big for his wiry frame, but they were clean, and that was what mattered most. He ran a hand through his short curly hair, grabbed his sneakers, and tiptoed out of the room. In the kitchen, Malik poured himself a bowl of cereal, eating quickly so he could get an early start on the day. Saturdays were his favorite days, not because they meant no school, but because they gave him the time to help out around the neighborhood. As soon as he finished, he washed the bowl and spoon, leaving everything as neat as his mother had taught him. He stepped outside into the morning sun, blinking at the brightness. Their small, two-bedroom house was modest and showed its age, but it was home. Malik walked around to the back, where the old push lawnmower was stored in a rusty shed. It had been his father's, and though the machine was well past its prime, Malik had kept it in working order. As he wheeled the lawnmower out onto the cracked sidewalk, he felt a sense of purpose. He had a list in his head of the neighbors who could use a hand, starting with Mrs. Thompson, who lived just down the street. Her lawn had been getting overgrown, and with her bad knees, Malik knew she couldn't manage it on her own. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," Malik called out as he arrived at her house. Mrs. Thompson, a sweet old lady with a face full of wrinkles and a smile that never faded, waved from her porch. "Morning, Malik. You're up bright and early again. You're such a good boy." Malik smiled back. "I'll have your lawn looking nice in no time, Mrs. Thompson. You don't have to, you know." "I wish I could pay you something," she said, her voice tinged with concern. Malik shook his head. "No need, Mrs. Thompson. I'm happy to help." With that, he set to work, pushing the lawnmower across the yard. The rhythm of the mowing was comforting, and before long, the tall grass was trimmed neatly. Mrs. Thompson brought him a cold glass of lemonade when he finished, and they chatted for a few minutes before Malik moved on to the next house on his mental list. Scene 2: The Unkempt Lawn. After finishing up Mrs. Thompson's yard, Malik wiped the sweat from his brow and looked across the street. His eyes landed on a house he hadn't paid much attention to before, Mr. Harrison's house. It was different from the others on the block, larger and more imposing, but the lawn was overgrown and wild. The sight was jarring compared to the other well-kept yards in the neighborhood. Malik paused, curiosity piqued. He had heard about Mr. Harrison, the mysterious old man who had moved into the neighborhood a few months ago, but he had never seen him up close. The man kept to himself, and rumors swirled about who he was and why he had come to their part of town. Some said he was a rich businessman who had lost everything, while others claimed he was hiding from something, or someone. Malik considered for a moment. He had other lawns he could mow, but something about Mr. Harrison's neglected yard tugged at him. It didn't feel right to leave it that way. After all, wasn't this what his mother had taught him? To help those who might need it, even if they didn't ask. Without further hesitation, Malik wheeled his lawnmower across the street. The tall grass crunched underfoot as he pushed the mower onto the lawn. The blades whirred to life, and Malik began the process of cutting through the thick greenery. As he worked, he found himself wondering about the man who lived in the house. What kind of person would let their lawn get this bad? And why? The sun climbed higher in the sky as Malik worked, sweat dripping down his face and soaking his shirt. But the yard slowly transformed, the wild grass giving way to a neat, even surface. By the time he finished, Malik was exhausted but satisfied. The lawn looked like it belonged to the rest of the neighborhood now. He glanced up at the house, half expecting to see someone peering out from behind the curtains, but the windows remained closed, the house silent. Malik shrugged and turned to head home, his thoughts already moving to the next task on his list. Scene 3, The Unexpected Gift. The next morning, Malik was jolted awake by the sound of car horns blaring outside. Confused, he jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. What he saw made him blink in disbelief. Sitting in the front yard was a brand new, top-of-the-line lawnmower. It gleamed in the morning sunlight, so out of place in their small, worn-down yard that Malik thought he must be dreaming. He quickly pulled on his clothes and ran outside, his heart pounding with excitement and confusion. As he approached the lawnmower, Malik noticed a note attached to the handle. His hands trembled as he reached out and unfolded the piece of paper. The handwriting was neat, almost formal. "Thank you for your kindness. You've inspired me to do something more." There was no name, but Malik didn't need one to know who it was from. Mr. Harrison. But why? Malik stood there, staring at the note and the lawnmower, his mind racing. He had only done what he thought was right. Why would someone give him such an extravagant gift in return? Malik? His mother's voice broke through his thoughts. Angela stood on the porch, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "What's going on? Where did that come from?" I think it's from Mr. Harrison," Malik stammered, holding up the note for her to see. Angela's brow furrowed as she read the note. "Mr. Harrison? The man across the street?" "Yeah. I mowed his lawn yesterday. It was a mess, and I thought I'd help out," Malik explained, his voice still tinged with disbelief. Angela shook her head slowly, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "That's a very generous gift. But, Malik, we don't know this man. Why would he give you something like this?" "I don't know, Mom," Malik admitted, feeling a knot of uncertainty forming in his stomach. "But maybe I should go thank him." Angela hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but be careful. We don't know anything about him, Malik." "I will," Malik promised, though the excitement in his chest was now tempered by a sense of unease. He carefully wheeled the new lawnmower to the side of the house, his mind already racing with questions. Scene 4, Malik's Curiosity. Malik walked across the street to Mr. Harrison's house, his heart beating a little faster with each step. The closer he got, the more he noticed the state of disrepair the house was in. The paint was chipped, the windows dirty, and the garden overgrown with weeds. It was a stark contrast to the grandeur the house must have once held. He reached the front door and hesitated for a moment, then raised his hand and knocked. The sound echoed through the quiet house, but no answer came. Malik waited, shifting on his feet, and then knocked again, louder this time. Still, there was no response. A part of him wanted to leave, to turn around and pretend that the new lawnmower had simply appeared out of thin air. But another part, the part that had driven him to mow Mr. Harrison's lawn in the first place, urged him to stay. He had to know why the old man had given him such a gift. He had to understand what kind of person Mr. Harrison was. When it became clear that no one was going to answer the door, Malik stepped back and looked around. He noticed the mailbox at the end of the driveway and decided to leave a note there. He quickly scribbled a thank you on a scrap of paper he found in his pocket and placed it in the mailbox. As he walked back home, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mr. Harrison than met the eye. The questions swirling in his mind only grew, and he knew that this was just the beginning. He would have to find out more about the mysterious man across the street, even if it meant stepping into a world far more complicated than his own. And so, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, Malik returned home, already planning his next move. Whatever secrets Mr. Harrison was hiding, Malik was determined to uncover them. Chapter 2, The Mystery Deepens. Scene 1, A Mother's Concern. Malik could hardly wait to tell his mother about the new lawnmower. The moment she returned from work, tired and rubbing her temples, he met her at the door. "Mom! You won't believe what happened today." Malik's excitement was infectious, but Angela, still wearing her work clothes, raised an eyebrow as she set down her purse. "What's all the fuss about, Malik?" "I just got in," she replied, though a small smile played on her lips. "Come outside, I need to show you something." Malik tugged at her arm, leading her out the front door. Angela followed, curious but wary. When they stepped outside, Malik pointed to the brand new lawnmower gleaming under the porch light. Angela's eyes widened in surprise. "Where did that come from?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Mr. Harrison," Malik said, beaming. "He left it for me this morning. There was a note too. It said, 'Thank you for your kindness. You've inspired me to do something more.'" Angela's smile faded into a frown as she walked closer to the lawnmower. She ran her fingers over the shiny new handle, her thoughts racing. "Malik. I don't know if this is a good idea." "What do you mean, Mom?" Malik's excitement dimmed, sensing his mother's unease. Angela turned to him, her expression serious. "We don't know this man. I've heard rumors about him, Malik. People say he's rich but lost everything because of some scandal. I'm not sure we should be accepting gifts from him, especially something this expensive." "But, Mom, I didn't ask for it," Malik insisted, his heart sinking. "I just mowed his lawn because it needed it. I thought you'd be proud." Angela softened at her son's words. She knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level. "I am proud of you, Malik. You have a good heart, and you're always helping others. But sometimes, things aren't as simple as they seem. I just want you to be careful, okay?" Malik nodded, though the excitement he had felt earlier was now clouded with doubt. "Okay, Mom. I'll be careful." Angela hugged him tightly, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I know you will. Just promise me you won't go over there again until we know more about him." "I promise," Malik replied, though the curiosity still nagged at him. As they went back inside, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mr. Harrison's story, and he was determined to find out what it was. Scene 2, Uncovering the Past. The next morning, after his mother had left for work, Malik decided he needed answers. He had promised not to visit Mr. Harrison, but he hadn't promised not to find out more about him. The only place he could think of to start was the local library. The library was a small, quiet building on the edge of town. Malik often came here to do his homework or to escape the noise of the neighborhood. Today, though, he had a different mission. "Good morning, Malik," Mrs. Jenkins, the librarian, greeted him as he entered. She was a kind woman in her 60s, with silver hair and glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "What brings you here so early?" "Morning, Mrs. Jenkins," Malik replied with a polite nod. "I need to look up some old newspapers. Do you think you could help me?" "Of course," Mrs. Jenkins said, her curiosity piqued. "What are you looking for?" Malik hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. "I'm trying to find out more about a man named Mr. Harrison. He moved into our neighborhood recently, and I've heard some things about him." Mrs. Jenkins' expression turned thoughtful. "Mr. Harrison, you say? I think I remember something about him. Let's see what we can find." She led Malik to the microfilm machine, and they began searching through the archives. It didn't take long before they found a series of articles about Edward Harrison, a once prominent businessman who had fallen from grace after a major financial scandal. The headlines told the story in stark terms: business tycoon accused of embezzlement, Harrison loses fortune in fraud case, once mighty mogul disappears from public eye. Malik's eyes widened as he read the articles. The man who had given him the lawnmower had once been a wealthy, powerful figure in the business world, only to lose everything in a scandal that had ruined his reputation. It was hard to reconcile this image with the quiet, reclusive figure he had seen only from a distance. "Is this the same Mr. Harrison?" Malik asked, looking up at Mrs. Jenkins. "It certainly seems so," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "It's a shame what happened to him. He was respected by many, but when the scandal broke, everyone turned their backs on him. I haven't heard anything about him in years." Malik felt a pang of sympathy for Mr. Harrison. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to lose everything and be ostracized by the world. But at the same time, questions swirled in his mind. What had really happened? And why had Mr. Harrison chosen to live in his neighborhood, of all places? "Thank you for your help, Mrs. Jenkins," Malik said, his thoughts still racing. "Anytime, Malik. Just be careful, all right? Not everything in those articles may be true, but there's always a reason why people end up where they do." "I will," Malik promised, though he knew that his curiosity had only deepened. He needed to talk to Mr. Harrison himself, to understand the man behind the headlines. Scene 3, The Unexpected Visitor. That afternoon, Malik decided to visit Mr. Harrison's house again. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to speak with the old man, to hear his side of the story. He knew his mother wouldn't approve, but something inside him urged him forward. This time, when he reached Mr. Harrison's door, he took a deep breath and knocked. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, and just as Malik was about to turn away, the door creaked open. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, his pale blue eyes narrowing as he saw Malik. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and Malik felt a strange mix of fear and determination. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrison," Malik said, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his chest. "I'm Malik. I mowed your lawn the other day." Mr. Harrison's expression softened slightly, and he nodded. "Yes, I remember. You're the boy with the old lawnmower. I see you received the new one." "Yes, thank you," Malik replied. "But I wanted to talk to you about something else. May I come in?" Mr. Harrison hesitated, his eyes searching Malik's face. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing the boy to enter. The inside of the house was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old wood and dust. Malik followed Mr. Harrison into a sitting room filled with antique furniture and heavy drapes that blocked out most of the light. "What is it you wanted to talk about?" Mr. Harrison asked, sitting down in an armchair and gesturing for Malik to take a seat across from him. Malik sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. "I went to the library today and found some old newspapers about you. I read about what happened, about the scandal." Mr. Harrison's face hardened, the lines of age and regret deepening. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Malik wondered if he had overstepped. But then, Mr. Harrison spoke, his voice low and rough. So, you've been digging into my past, he said, more a statement than a question. I didn't mean to pry, Malik said quickly. I just wanted to understand. I wanted to know why you gave me the lawnmower, why you're here in this neighborhood. Mr. Harrison sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of years. I suppose it's fair for you to ask, given what you've done for me. The truth is, Malik, I've done things I'm not proud of. I made mistakes, big ones, and I paid the price. I lost everything, my money, my reputation, my friends. I came here because I wanted to disappear, to leave that part of my life behind. Malik listened, his heart aching for the old man. But why did you give me the lawnmower? You didn't have to do that. A faint smile touched Mr. Harrison's lips, the first sign of warmth Malik had seen. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that there's still kindness in the world. You did something for me without expecting anything in return. That's rare, Malik. And it inspired me to do something in return. Malik didn't know what to say. He had never thought of his actions as anything special, but hearing Mr. Harrison's words made him feel like he had made a difference. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, Malik said softly. I didn't know. Mr. Harrison nodded, his gaze distant as if he were seeing something far away. You're a good boy, Malik. But be careful who you trust. My past isn't something I'm proud of, and I don't want to drag you into it. I understand, Malik replied, though he wasn't sure he did. But if you ever need help, I'm here. Mr. Harrison's eyes met Malik's, and for a moment, the old man seemed to struggle with something unsaid. But in the end, he only nodded. Thank you, Malik. You should go now. And take care of that lawnmower, it's yours to keep. Malik stood, feeling the weight of the conversation settle over him. He nodded to Mr. Harrison and left the house, his mind swirling with thoughts. As he walked home, he couldn't help but feel that there was still more to Mr. Harrison's story, and that somehow, he was now a part of it. Scene 4, A Conflicted Heart. Later that evening, Malik sat on a bench in the city park, his thoughts tangled in knots. The park was a place where he often came to think, to escape the pressures of life. The setting sun cast long shadows over the worn playground and the patches of grass that had survived despite the wear and tear. As he stared at the basketball court, where a few kids were playing a casual game, Malik felt a presence beside him. He turned to see Jamal, his best friend, sitting down with a curious look. Hey, man. You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, Jamal said, nudging him with an elbow. Malik sighed, grateful for the familiar company. I don't know what to do, Jamal. I've been talking to Mr. Harrison, the guy who gave me the lawnmower. Yeah. What about him? Jamal asked, his interest piqued. Malik hesitated, then told Jamal everything, about the scandal, the conversation they'd had, and the strange connection he felt with the old man. Jamal listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. So, what's the problem? Jamal asked when Malik finished. I don't know, Malik admitted. My mom's worried, and I don't blame her. But Mr. Harrison, he's not what I expected. He's got a past, but he's not a bad person. I just feel like there's more to this, like I'm supposed to help him somehow. Jamal leaned back, considering Malik's words. Sounds like you're in deep, man. But you gotta be careful. People with a past like that, it can get messy. I know, Malik said, frustration creeping into his voice. But I can't just walk away. It feels wrong. Jamal nodded, understanding. Look, Malik, you've got a good heart, and that's why this is hard. But you don't have to do it alone. Talk to your mom, figure out what's right. Just remember, sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, but it's worth it. Malik smiled, grateful for Jamal's advice. Thanks, Jamal. I needed that. Anytime, bro, Jamal said, standing up and offering Malik a hand. Now come on, let's shoot some hoops. You need to clear your head. Malik laughed, feeling a little lighter as he stood up. As they walked toward the basketball court, he knew that the choices ahead wouldn't be simple. But with Jamal's support and the determination to do what was right, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 3, The Offer. Scene 1, A Proposition. Malik found himself standing on Mr. Harrison's porch once again, the summer sun beating down on his back. It had been a few days since their last conversation, and Malik couldn't shake the feeling that there was unfinished business between them. The door creaked open before he could knock, and there stood Mr. Harrison, his pale blue eyes regarding Malik with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, perhaps a quiet resolve. "Good afternoon, Malik," Mr. Harrison said, stepping aside to let him in. "I've been expecting you." Malik hesitated, then stepped inside. The house felt cooler today, but the air still carried the weight of time and secrets. Mr. Harrison led him to the same sitting room where they had talked before. This time, the old man seemed more at ease, as if he had made a decision. "Have a seat," Mr. Harrison offered, gesturing to the armchair across from him. Malik sat down, sensing that something important was about to happen. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," Mr. Harrison began, folding his hands in his lap. "You asked me why I gave you that lawnmower, and I told you it was because you reminded me of the kindness that still exists in the world. But there's more to it than that." Malik listened intently, his heart quickening. "What do you mean?" Mr. Harrison took a deep breath, as if preparing himself. "I'm an old man, Malik. I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, that I can never fully atone for. But I want to try. I want to make amends in whatever way I can, and I believe you can help me do that." "Help you?" Malik echoed, surprised. "How?" "I'm lonely, Malik. I have no family, no real friends left. But I see something in you, something good, something honest. I'd like to hire you, if you're willing. Not just to mow the lawn, but to help me with things around the house, to keep me company. In return, I'll pay you more than you've ever earned before. Enough to help your mother with the bills, maybe even more." Malik's mind raced. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was a chance to ease the burden on his mother, to finally have enough money to make a real difference. But he remembered his mother's warnings, her concern about getting too close to a man with such a troubled past. "I don't know, Mr. Harrison," Malik said slowly. "My mom, she's worried about me getting involved with you. She's heard things about your past, and she doesn't want me to get caught up in something bad." Mr. Harrison nodded, his expression somber. "I understand her concerns, and she's right to be cautious. But I'm not asking you to do anything wrong, Malik. I just need someone I can trust, someone who can help me as I try to make amends. I promise you, I won't do anything to hurt you or your family. If you decide it's not for you, you can walk away at any time." Malik considered the offer, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "Can I think about it? I need to talk to my mom first." "Of course," Mr. Harrison said, offering a small smile. "Take all the time you need. Just know that the offer stands, and I would be grateful for your help." Malik nodded, standing up. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'll let you know." As Malik left the house, his thoughts were a whirlwind of possibilities and doubts. He knew he needed to talk to his mother, but part of him already knew what she would say. The question was whether he could convince her, or himself, that this was the right thing to do. Scene 2, Seeking Advice. Malik walked home slowly, his mind heavy with the weight of Mr. Harrison's offer. The closer he got to his house, the more his stomach churned with nerves. He knew his mother would be home soon, and he wasn't sure how to approach the conversation. But he had to try. When he arrived, Angela was already in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of chicken and rice filled the small house, a comforting aroma that usually made Malik's mouth water. Today, though, it only added to the tension he felt. "Hey, Mom," Malik said, leaning against the doorway. Angela turned, smiling at him. "Hey, sweetheart. How was your day?" "It was, okay," Malik replied, hesitating. "Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about." Angela's smile faded as she noticed the seriousness in Malik's tone. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and sat down at the small kitchen table. "What's on your mind?" Malik took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "I went to see Mr. Harrison again today. He made me an offer." Angela's eyes narrowed slightly, her concern evident. "What kind of offer?" "He wants to hire me," Malik explained. "Not just to mow the lawn, but to help him around the house and keep him company. He said he'd pay me a lot, enough to help with the bills and maybe more." Angela's brow furrowed as she absorbed the information. "Malik, I don't know about this. I know you want to help, but this man, we don't know what he's capable of." "I know, Mom," Malik said quickly, trying to ease her worries. "But he said I can walk away at any time if I don't feel comfortable. He just needs someone he can trust, and I think I can help him. He's lonely, and he wants to make up for the mistakes he's made." Angela sighed, her hands trembling slightly as she reached across the table to hold Malik's. "I just want what's best for you, Malik. I don't want you to get hurt or caught up in something you don't understand." Malik squeezed her hands, his voice gentle. "I know, Mom. And I promise, I'll be careful. I just feel like, maybe this is a way I can really help us. I'll listen to you, though. If you don't think it's a good idea, I won't do it." Angela looked into her son's eyes, seeing the determination and kindness that had always been a part of him. She knew he was growing up, that he wanted to take on more responsibility, but the idea of him working for a man like Mr. Harrison frightened her. "All right, Malik," she said finally, her voice heavy with resignation. "You can do it, but only if you promise to come to me if anything feels wrong. I don't care how much money he offers, nothing is worth your safety." "I promise, Mom," Malik said, relief flooding through him. "Thank you for trusting me." Angela nodded, though the worry didn't leave her face. "Just be careful, Malik. I'll be praying for you." With the decision made, Malik felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He knew this was a big step, but he also knew he couldn't pass up the opportunity to help his mother and learn more about Mr. Harrison. The next day, he would go back to Mr. Harrison's house and accept the offer, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. Scene 3, First day on the job. The next morning, Malik stood on Mr. Harrison's porch once again, this time with a sense of purpose. He had made up his mind, and now it was time to see where this new path would lead. When Mr. Harrison opened the door, there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by a nod of approval. "Good morning, Malik," Mr. Harrison said. "I take it you've made your decision." "Yes, sir," Malik replied, trying to sound confident. "I'll take the job." Mr. Harrison's lips curved into a rare smile. "I'm glad to hear it. Come in, and I'll show you what needs to be done." Malik followed Mr. Harrison into the house, where the older man began explaining the various tasks. Most of the work involved small things, dusting, organizing papers, and helping with minor repairs. But as they worked, Malik noticed that Mr. Harrison seemed more interested in talking than in the tasks themselves. "I've been living alone for a long time," Mr. Harrison said as they sorted through a stack of old documents in his office. "It's strange, having someone else around, but I think it's good for me. And for you, too." Malik nodded, his hands busy with the papers. "Yeah, it's nice to be able to help out. My mom's always telling me to help people who need it." "Your mother's a wise woman," Mr. Harrison said, a touch of admiration in his voice. "She's raised you well, Malik." They continued working, the atmosphere growing more comfortable as the day went on. Malik found that he didn't mind the tasks, they were simple enough, and he enjoyed the sense of accomplishment they brought. But more than that, he found himself growing curious about the man he was working for. Mr. Harrison was clearly burdened by his past, but there was a kindness in him that Malik hadn't expected. As they finished up for the day, Mr. Harrison handed Malik an envelope. "Your payment for today. You've done good work, Malik. I'm glad you decided to take the job." Malik took the envelope, feeling the weight of the money inside. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm glad I did too." As Malik left the house, he felt a sense of pride and anticipation. He had taken the first step, and though he knew there would be challenges ahead, he was ready to face them. But as he walked home, something caught his eye, a locked drawer in Mr. Harrison's desk that he hadn't noticed before. It nagged at him, a small mystery in the back of his mind, but he pushed the thought aside for now. Scene 4, a glimpse of the truth. The next day, Malik returned to Mr. Harrison's house, eager to continue his work. The routine was becoming familiar, and he felt more comfortable with each passing day. But today, something was different. As he dusted the shelves in Mr. Harrison's office, his eyes kept drifting to the locked drawer in the desk. It was strange, why would Mr. Harrison lock just one drawer? The rest of the desk was filled with mundane things, old letters, pens, notebooks. But that one drawer seemed to hold something more, something Mr. Harrison didn't want anyone to see. Malik's curiosity got the better of him. He hesitated, glancing toward the door to make sure Mr. Harrison wasn't coming, and then he knelt down beside the desk. He tugged at the drawer, but it didn't budge. Frustrated, he tried again, harder this time, and suddenly the drawer jerked open, the lock snapping with a soft click. Inside, Malik found a stack of papers, neatly organized but yellowed with age. He didn't have time to read them before he heard footsteps approaching. Panicking, he shoved the papers back into the drawer and tried to close it, but it stuck halfway. The footsteps grew louder, and Malik's heart pounded in his chest. "What are you doing?" Mr. Harrison's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Malik froze, caught red-handed with the drawer still open. He turned slowly, his face pale with fear. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison," Malik stammered. "I didn't mean to, I was just curious." Mr. Harrison's expression was unreadable, but there was a hardness in his eyes that Malik hadn't seen before. For a long moment, they stared at each other, the tension thick in the air. Finally, Mr. Harrison sighed, the anger draining from his face. "Curiosity can be a dangerous thing, Malik," he said quietly. "Some things are better left alone." Malik nodded, too shaken to speak. He expected Mr. Harrison to scold him, to tell him to leave, but instead, the older man knelt down and gently closed the drawer, locking it with a key from his pocket. "I'm not angry," Mr. Harrison said, his voice softer now. "But you need to understand, Malik, there are things in my past that I'm not proud of. Things that I keep hidden for a reason. I'm trying to make amends, but it's not easy. Please, don't pry into things that don't concern you." Malik swallowed hard, guilt and shame washing over him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison. I won't do it again." Mr. Harrison nodded, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder. "I believe you. Let's just move on, all right?" Malik nodded, grateful for Mr. Harrison's forgiveness, but as they continued with their work, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had glimpsed a part of the truth, a truth that was much darker than he had ever imagined. Chapter 4, The Revelation. Scene 1, Unearthing Secrets. The days following Malik's discovery of the locked drawer were filled with tension and uncertainty. He couldn't shake the memory of Mr. Harrison's reaction, nor the feeling that there was something much deeper going on. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Malik decided to do some more digging, this time, on his own. On a quiet Saturday morning, while his mother was out running errands, Malik slipped out of the house and made his way back to the library. Mrs. Jenkins, the librarian, greeted him warmly, but Malik's mind was focused on one thing, finding out more about Mr. Harrison's past. "Back again so soon?" Mrs. Jenkins asked with a smile. "Yes, ma'am," Malik replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I need to look up some more information. Mrs. Jenkins nodded, leading him to the archive room. You know where to find everything. Just let me know if you need any help. Malik thanked her and began his search, diving deeper into the old newspapers and records. He found more articles detailing Mr. Harrison's fall from grace, the financial scandal that had destroyed his business, the court trials, and the subsequent isolation that followed. But there was one detail that caught Malik's eye, the name of a man who had testified against Mr. Harrison, a former business partner named Robert Langley. Langley's testimony had been a turning point in the case, leading to Mr. Harrison's conviction and the loss of his fortune. The more Malik read, the more he realized that Langley's involvement had been crucial, and that Mr. Harrison might still be hiding the full truth about what had happened. As Malik pored over the articles, his heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but he also knew that confronting Mr. Harrison would be difficult. What if Mr. Harrison wasn't the man Malik thought he was? What if his intentions were not as noble as they seemed? With a heavy heart, Malik gathered his notes and left the library, his mind racing with questions. He knew that he had to confront Mr. Harrison, but the thought of doing so filled him with dread. What would he say? How would Mr. Harrison react? Malik could only hope that the man who had shown him kindness was still in there, somewhere beneath the secrets and lies. Scene 2, Confrontation. Malik hesitated outside Mr. Harrison's house, his nerves on edge. The weight of what he had discovered pressed heavily on his chest, and he knew that this confrontation would change everything. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. Mr. Harrison answered almost immediately, his expression softening when he saw Malik. "Malik, come in. I wasn't expecting you today." Malik stepped inside, his heart pounding. "I need to talk to you, Mr. Harrison. It's important." Sensing the seriousness in Malik's tone, Mr. Harrison led him into the sitting room. "What's on your mind, son?" Malik took a seat, his hands trembling slightly. "I went back to the library and found more articles about your past, about the trial and the people involved. I read about a man named Robert Langley." At the mention of Langley's name, Mr. Harrison's face hardened, the lines around his eyes deepening. He looked away, a heavy silence settling between them. "Langley was my business partner," Mr. Harrison said finally, his voice low. "He's the one who testified against me, who helped the prosecution build their case. But there's more to it than that." Malik swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. "What really happened, Mr. Harrison? Why did Langley turn on you?" Mr. Harrison closed his eyes, the pain of the past etched into his features. "Because I made a mistake, Malik, a terrible mistake. Langley and I were partners for years, but when things started to go wrong, I panicked. I made some bad decisions that hurt a lot of people. Langley saw an opportunity to save himself, and he took it. He betrayed me to protect his own interests, and in the end, I paid the price." Malik's heart ached as he listened, but he couldn't stop now. "But why didn't you tell me this before? Why didn't you tell me the whole truth?" Mr. Harrison looked at Malik, his eyes filled with regret. "Because I didn't want you to see me as a villain. I wanted to believe that I could still be a good man, that I could make amends for what I'd done. But the truth is, Malik, I'm not sure I can ever make things right." The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Malik struggled to process everything, the image of the kind, lonely old man he had come to care for now tainted by the reality of his past. "I don't know what to do," Malik admitted, his voice shaking. "I thought I was helping you, but now I don't know if I'm just getting in too deep." Mr. Harrison sighed, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "I don't blame you for feeling that way, Malik. But you've already done more for me than you know. You've given me hope, a chance to try to make things right. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I do hope you'll give me a chance to make amends." Malik sat in silence, his thoughts swirling. He had come here to confront Mr. Harrison, but now he was left with more questions than answers. The choice before him was a difficult one. Should he continue to help Mr. Harrison, knowing the full extent of his past, or should he walk away before it was too late? Scene 3, a heavy decision. Malik left Mr. Harrison's house with a heavy heart, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. He needed to clear his head, to think about everything that had just happened. Without even realizing it, his feet carried him to the city park, the place he always went when he needed to be alone. The park was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn playground and the patches of grass. Malik sat on a bench, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, and stared out at the empty basketball court. As he sat there, lost in thought, he heard a familiar voice. "Malik?" Malik looked up to see Jamal approaching, a concerned look on his face. "Hey, man. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Malik managed a weak smile. "Something like that. I just had a talk with Mr. Harrison." Jamal sat down beside him, his expression serious. "What happened?" Malik hesitated, then told Jamal everything, about the articles he had found, the confrontation with Mr. Harrison, and the confession that had followed. Jamal listened quietly, his brow furrowed as he absorbed the story. "Wow," Jamal said when Malik finished. "That's heavy, man. I can't even imagine what you're going through." "I don't know what to do," Malik admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was helping him, but now I don't even know if I should be involved." Jamal nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "It's a tough situation, no doubt. But I think you need to ask yourself what you really believe in. Do you think Mr. Harrison can change? Do you think he deserves a second chance?" Malik looked down at his hands, his thoughts churning. "I don't know. I want to believe he can change, but what if he can't? What if I'm just wasting my time?" Jamal placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, offering a reassuring squeeze. "Nobody can answer that but you, man. But from what you've told me, it sounds like Mr. Harrison really does want to make things right. Maybe he's not perfect, but who is? The question is whether you're willing to stick it out and see if he can follow through." Malik took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He knew Jamal was right, only he could decide what to do next. But the thought of walking away from Mr. Harrison now, after everything they had been through, felt wrong. There was still a part of him that believed in the old man, that wanted to see him find redemption. "Thanks, Jamal," Malik said, his voice steadier now. "I think I know what I need to do." Jamal nodded, giving him an encouraging smile. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back. Just remember, you're not in this alone." Malik smiled back, grateful for his friend's support. As they sat together in the fading light of the afternoon, Malik felt a sense of clarity beginning to form. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew what he had to do. Scene 4, the unexpected visit. That evening, as Malik was helping his mother with dinner, there was a knock at the door. Angela, still wearing her apron, wiped her hands and went to answer it. Malik continued stirring the pot of rice, but his ears perked up when he heard a familiar voice. "Good evening, Mrs. Johnson." Malik froze, recognizing Mr. Harrison's voice. He quickly turned off the stove and hurried to the front door, his heart racing. "Mr. Harrison?" Angela asked, her tone polite but guarded. "What brings you here?" Mr. Harrison stood on the porch, holding his hat in his hands. He looked older and more fragile than Malik had ever seen him, as if the weight of the world had finally taken its toll. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Mr. Harrison said, his voice soft. "But I needed to speak with you and Malik. May I come in?" Angela hesitated, glancing at Malik. He nodded slightly, and she stepped aside to let Mr. Harrison enter. The three of them sat down in the small living room, the air thick with tension. "I wanted to apologize," Mr. Harrison began, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I haven't been entirely honest with you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. Malik has been helping me, but he didn't know the full story. I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I've been trying to find a way to make amends. Angela listened carefully, her expression unreadable. What kind of mistakes? Mr. Harrison sighed, the pain evident in his voice. I was involved in a financial scandal years ago, and it ruined many lives, including my own. I lost everything, my fortune, my reputation, my family. I moved here to escape, to hide from what I'd done. But when Malik started helping me, I realized I couldn't keep running. I needed to face my past and try to make things right. Angela glanced at Malik, her eyes filled with concern. And what does this have to do with my son? Mr. Harrison looked up, his eyes filled with sincerity. Malik has given me something I haven't had in years, hope. Hope that I can still do something good, that I can make a difference, even if it's small. I know I don't deserve his kindness, but I'm asking for your forgiveness. And I'm offering something in return. Angela's brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Mr. Harrison reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to Angela, who opened it and gasped. Inside was a check for a significant amount of money, more than enough to pay off their debts and secure Malik's future. I want to help you, Mr. Harrison said, his voice trembling. But there's one condition. I need Malik's help to face the people I've wronged. I need him to stand by me as I try to make amends. It's a lot to ask, I know, but I don't think I can do it alone. Angela looked at the check, then at Mr. Harrison, her emotions a whirlwind of fear, anger, and confusion. She turned to Malik, searching his eyes for answers. Malik, what do you think? She asked quietly. Malik took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision on his shoulders. He knew this was a turning point, a moment that would define the rest of his life. But as he looked at Mr. Harrison, he saw a man who was genuinely trying to change, to make up for the wrongs he had committed. I think we should help him, Mom, Malik said, his voice steady. I believe he can change, and I want to be a part of that. Angela closed her eyes, tears welling up as she nodded. All right, Malik. If you believe in him, then I'll support you. But we'll do this together, as a family. Mr. Harrison's eyes filled with gratitude as he nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Thank you, Malik. I promise I won't let you down. As they sat together in the small living room, a sense of resolution settled over them. The road ahead would be difficult, but they would face it together. And in that moment, Malik knew he had made the right choice. Chapter 5, Redemption or Ruin. Scene 1, The Final Choice. The next morning, Malik sat at the small kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. His mother, Angela, sat across from him, worry etched across her face. The night before had been filled with restless thoughts, and Malik knew the time had come to make his decision. Angela broke the silence first. Malik, you don't have to do this. Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you, but I want you to know that you don't have to carry this burden. Malik looked up, meeting her gaze. He saw the concern in her eyes, but he also saw something else, trust. She trusted him to make the right choice, even if it wasn't easy. I know, Mom, Malik replied, his voice steady. But I've thought about it a lot. I believe Mr. Harrison really wants to change, and I think I can help him. But only if he's willing to face what he's done, to make things right with the people he hurt. Angela nodded slowly. If that's what you believe, then I support you. But promise me you'll be careful, Malik. This isn't going to be easy, and I don't want you to get hurt. I promise, Mom, Malik said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. I'll be careful. And I won't do it alone. We'll do this together. Angela smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. You're growing up so fast, Malik. I'm proud of you. Malik smiled back, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. The path ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it. And he knew he had his mother's support, which gave him the strength to move forward. "I'm going to talk to Mr. Harrison," Malik said, standing up. "It's time we faced the past." Angela nodded, watching him go. As Malik stepped out of the house and made his way to Mr. Harrison's, he felt a sense of resolve settle over him. This was it, the moment that would define everything. Scene 2, Facing the Past. Mr. Harrison was waiting for Malik in his office, the weight of their last conversation still heavy in the air. Malik entered, and the older man looked up, a mixture of hope and apprehension in his eyes. "Malik," Mr. Harrison said, standing up. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back." Malik nodded, his expression serious. "I've thought about everything you said, Mr. Harrison. And I'm willing to help you, but only if you're ready to face the people you've hurt, to make things right." Mr. Harrison's shoulders sagged slightly, as if the weight of his past was pressing down on him. He sat back down, his hands trembling slightly. "I've spent so many years running from what I've done," Mr. Harrison confessed. "I've hidden away, convincing myself that I could never make up for it. But you've shown me that there's still a chance, Malik. A chance to do something good, even if it's small." Malik took a seat across from Mr. Harrison, his voice firm. "It's not going to be easy. The people you hurt, they deserve an apology, and more than that, they deserve justice. Are you ready for that?" Mr. Harrison hesitated, his eyes filled with regret. "I am. I know it won't fix everything, but I want to try. And I want to do it with your help, if you're still willing." Malik nodded, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "I'll help you, Mr. Harrison. But we have to do this right. No more secrets." Mr. Harrison agreed, his voice filled with determination. No more secrets. Together, they began to make a plan. The first step would be to contact one of the people who had been most affected by Mr. Harrison's actions, Robert Langley, the former business partner who had testified against him. Malik knew that confronting Langley would be difficult, but it was a necessary step toward redemption. Scene 3, The Meeting. A few days later, Malik and Mr. Harrison sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe, waiting for Robert Langley to arrive. The tension was palpable, and Malik could feel the nerves radiating from Mr. Harrison. "Are you sure about this?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice wavering slightly. Malik nodded, trying to reassure him. "It's the right thing to do. Just be honest with him, and remember that this is about making things right." Mr. Harrison took a deep breath, nodding. "I'll do my best." The door to the cafe opened, and Malik saw a man in his late 50s walk in, his expression guarded. It was Robert Langley. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Mr. Harrison. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the weight of their shared past hanging between them. Langley approached the table, his steps hesitant. "Edward," he said, his voice cold. "I didn't expect to see you again." Mr. Harrison stood up, his hands trembling. "Robert, thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy, but I needed to see you, to apologize." Langley crossed his arms, his gaze hard. "Apologize? After everything that happened?" "I know I can't undo what I did," Mr. Harrison said, his voice filled with regret. "But I want to try to make amends. I've been hiding for too long, and I realize now that I need to face the consequences of my actions." Langley's expression softened slightly, though there was still a hint of bitterness in his eyes. "You cost me everything, Edward. My career, my reputation, it was all destroyed because of you." Mr. Harrison nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I know, and I'm so sorry, Robert. I was selfish, and I made terrible choices. But I'm trying to change, and I want to make things right, if you'll let me." There was a long silence as Langley considered Mr. Harrison's words. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I never thought I'd hear those words from you, Edward. But I can see that you're sincere. Maybe it's time to let go of the past." Mr. Harrison's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Robert. I can't tell you how much that means to me." Langley nodded, though there was still a trace of sadness in his expression. "It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. Just don't expect me to forget." "I understand," Mr. Harrison replied, his voice steady. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I'm committed to making amends in any way I can." Langley glanced at Malik, then back at Mr. Harrison. "And who's this?" "Your conscience." Mr. Harrison smiled faintly. "This is Malik. He's the reason I'm here today. He showed me that there's still hope for redemption." Langley looked at Malik, his expression softening. "You've got a good heart, kid. Don't let the world change that." Malik nodded, feeling a sense of pride. "I won't." As they talked, the tension began to ease, replaced by a tentative sense of understanding. The conversation was difficult, but it was a necessary step toward healing. By the end of the meeting, there was a sense that something had shifted, a small but significant step toward redemption. Scene 4, A New Beginning. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and difficult conversations. Mr. Harrison, with Malik's help, reached out to the other people he had wronged, offering apologies and financial restitution where possible. It wasn't easy, and there were many who refused to forgive, but the effort alone was enough to begin mending some of the damage. One evening, after a long day of meetings and phone calls, Malik and his mother sat on the porch of their small house. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. Malik felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known in a long time. "You did good, Malik," Angela said, her voice filled with pride. "I'm so proud of you." Malik smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." Angela wrapped an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. "You've grown up so much, Malik. You've made a difference in Mr. Harrison's life, and in ours." Malik looked out at the street, where kids were playing and neighbors were chatting. The world felt a little brighter, a little more hopeful. He knew that there were still challenges ahead, but he also knew that they could face them together. "Mr. Harrison told me he's going to sell his house," Malik said quietly. "He wants to move somewhere new, to start fresh." Angela nodded. "That's probably for the best. He needs a new beginning, just like we did." Malik sighed, a mix of sadness and hope in his heart. "He's leaving us a part of his estate, to help with the future. But more than that, he's given us something else, a chance to believe in second chances." Angela squeezed his shoulder, her voice soft. "And you gave him that chance, Malik. You gave him hope." As they sat together, watching the world go by, Malik felt a sense of closure. The journey had been difficult, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but it had been worth it. They had faced the past, and now they were ready to embrace the future. The story ended not with grand gestures, but with simple moments of connection and understanding. And in those moments, Malik knew that they had all found something precious: redemption, forgiveness, and the promise of a new beginning.